information purification for the first time. Secure from the pests of the weapon that any fleet or army on earth may them with their own. We shall prevail.
From the Great Basin to the Rockies to the four corners of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Dwayne Benson here for KMMU Main Street Media Utah, coming to you live. We are streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, and our website, kmmu.org. Please join our host, John Twitchell, for Let's Talk Utah's Talk with John. In the news, from the JFK files, apparently there are missing memorandums. In the news, from the JFK files, apparently there are missing memorandums that could contain crucial information that was never submitted to the National Archives, according to an author. James H. Johnston, author of Murder, Inc., the CIA under John F. Kennedy, told The Hill that memorandums written following a private hour-long conversation between LBJ and several CIA operatives at the author's residence 6 days after the former president's death are not included in the data dump. We're curious, what else could be missing? According to CNN, China calls Trump's new tariff a mistake upon a mistake and is looking for opportunity in the new global trade war. While many nations are scrambling to strike tariff deals with Trump, China is standing up to him, hoping to turn crisis into opportunity. Trump advisors say that more than 50 countries have reached out for tariff talks. Within 48 hours of Trump's market-hammering announcement on tariffs on countries across the world, China, the world's second largest economy, swiftly retaliated with its own punitive measures on U.S. goods and firms. President Donald Trump is winning big with several decisions by the Supreme Court. In a 5-4 ruling on Friday, the justices granted the administration's request to terminate the grants while litigation over the issue proceeds. The High Court's action lifted an order a federal judge in Boston issued last month, blocking the administration from terminating the grants for teacher training programs. Monday night, the court ruled that the Trump administration could continue to deport Venezuelan migrants using the Wartime Powers Act for now, overturning a lower court stay by Judge James Boasberg that had put a temporary stop to the deportations. A victory for the Trump administration. According to CNN, the Trump administration is highlighting drug cartels as the major national security threat, but omits climate change. The U.S. intelligence community's annual threat assessment led with the threat from drug cartels for the first time in the report's nearly 20-year history, according to Senate Intelligence Chairman Tom Cotton and a CNN review of previous assessments. The assessment omitted any reference to the national security implications of climate change, a sharp reversal from previous intelligence assessments, including those under Trump's first administration. What do you think about the threat assessment, John? Take it away, John.
Let's see. There we go. I'm playing with the toggle. Dwayne's playing with the toggle to put me up. So thank you, Dwayne, so much for that intro. Appreciate it. We will be getting to those subjects and more here soon, especially the ones that Dwayne mentioned. We will be covering those subjects when we have Joel Skausen join us here at, let's see, 5 o'clock, roughly 5 o'clock. I might have to give him a call. It's happened from time to time. In fact, I think it's happened every time I've given him a phone call. Hey, Joel, we're on. Or we're ready for you when you are, sir. So Joel Skausen of the World Affairs Brief will be joining us, and we'll be covering those topics. Some of the topics we're going to be covering coming up right away. But first, let's get this show off to a proper start. Now, when it comes to doing this show, there's two things that I like to start off at the top of every hour with, and that's the show prayer and the show mantra. Now, let's be clear. When it comes to the show prayer and the show mantra, it's the prayer of my heart, and it's the mantra that I try to achieve with the show. Heaven knows I don't achieve this in my own personal life. But you know what? I try to make it happen. What can I say? So let's start with the show prayer. I hope my show is a gift back to my forefathers, the founding fathers, and may it be an acceptable token to our Father above. Then the show mantra: where there is liberty, there is the Spirit of Christ. Where the Spirit of Christ is, there will be liberty. And the greater the Spirit of Christ, the greater liberty will be. All right, let's get rolling. So a number of things that I wanted to touch base on. And there's two that I want to start with. Actually, the first one that I want to start with is something that happened, I believe it was last weekend. And this was from Morning Wire. It was from their Morning Wire's kind of like news. They put this out. This information was out. So last week, I think many of you heard this, that at the University of Maryland, Stephanie Turner was disqualified from a fencing tournament last weekend after forfeiting a match against Redmond Sullivan. Sullivan used to compete as a male, but after switching to the female division, he won first place as at the Connecticut Division Junior Olympic qualifiers. So this was her statement. And I'm a woman, and this is a man, and I will not fence this individual. Women's sports are designed to demonstrate female athletic excellence, and that gets lost when there are men in the tournament. They reached out to U.S. Fencing, and they just came up, with the generic, well, we want to be all inclusive, at least for the women. So is this something that and a lot of people are on the left are like, yeah, John, this never happens. Actually, it happens quite a bit. So a UN report found that last year, over 600 female athletes in more than 400 competitions have lost more than 890 medals in 29 different sports. To cite just one, Zach Rose, who now identifies as Leah, easily won the high jump at Portland Interscholastic League varsity relays. He beat the girls in the competition by 2 inches. That is a significant amount for those that are not familiar with that competition. So he beat him by 2 inches. Now, funny thing though is he might have beat the girls in the competition by 2 inches, but for context, in 2023, Rose came in dead last in the same event for boys junior varsity. So when I look at this, I go, pull up the photo. So Dwayne was like, I have a photo for you. Which one is the male competitor? Let's see if I can figure it out. But the bottom line is, let's see if we can see. All right. I'm gonna assume it's the dude clear on screen right. That's my guess. I could be wrong, but was I correct, Dwayne? Let me know if I was correct, if you would. But I want to say, dude on screen right was the one. So the bottom line is, we have some people are not going to like me on this one. Where does this go back to? This goes back to allowing women and men's sports. We shouldn't have done that to begin with. We should have said, I know, there was wrestling, there's a few other sports like football. Hey, there's not a women's division, so we need to let girls compete. I disagree. The problem is, and letting women and reporters into men's locker rooms. That stems all those years ago from the commingling of the sexes, stems clear back all the way then. Something that I don't think happens, or something that didn't happen when I was a kid, when I was in high school sports. If you wanted to play and swing a bat and throw a ball and pitch and whatever, it was baseball for the boys and it was softball for the girls. Well, for those guys that barely didn't make the baseball team, they couldn't go over and play on the softball team, and it's quote unquote two different sports. So my statement is, and here in the state of Utah, volleyball was a lettering sport. Here in the state of Utah, I think it may now be a lettering sport, but up until recently, it's not. In fact, I don't even think it's still a lettering sport, is volleyball. A guy couldn't go and compete in high school in volleyball. It was, you couldn't join the girls' volleyball team. There was only girls' volleyball, and guys couldn't go play girls' volleyball. So, fast forward to now. We've allowed this intermingling of the sexes when it comes to sports. In my opinion, we should have kept it separate all the time and just say, I'm sorry, ladies, you're right. Some of the sports we don't have for you, and it's boys' competition. Now, that being said, I have been a little league football coach against girls, and I've had little league girls play on the football team that I've coached. I love them. I want them to succeed, and I want them to do well. But I don't know that it is the wisest thing to do. But if they're on my team and the league rules allow it, then I'm going to happily embrace them and let them come in. Now, I had to go against more than one team where we were an all-boy team, and I had to go against more than one team, and they're like, well, they got a girl. What do we do? I said, you hit her as hard as you would if it was a boy. You play against her the same way. Just see the number on the jersey, you see the color of the jersey, and you just figure out what position they're playing, and you go after them just the same way. Treat them the same way. Don't talk to them any way differently than you would any other kid. And I think that's the way to handle it if you have mixed sports. But I think it's absolutely wrong for men to be competing in women's sports. It's not fair. As soon as they hit, I don't think we should be allowing any transitioning before the age of 25. If you believe in the science, the brain doesn't stop changing until 25. So shouldn't we wait till then? Probably not. But hey, at the age of 18, you have the ability to consent. Okay, go ahead and do it. Now, I want to say it was back in 2019, back on K-Talk Radio. I did this bit when I was pretty much a new host, probably been on only for a couple of months. I had Lowell Nelson on, and I said, well, I said, I got a little bit. I got something I want to do with you. So I brought up, what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the smallest school in Utah, or the smallest school in the country that I can find, that's a Division I's girls NCAA basketball team, and I'm going to go to them and say, in 2 years, I guarantee you, I will have a Division I women's tournament win. I'll win the whole NCAA. And so what I said, what I would do is, and I said I'd even go and I'd use every single student every single student that I would go after would be after from that state, wherever it may be. And I was like, well, hopefully it can be, the university like SUU or something like that here in Utah. And I said I would go after them. I'd promise to win the NCAA tournament, women's tournament. And I said, I guarantee it, I'd get it done in 2 years, if not the very first year. And I said I'd have a smaller coaching staff than normal, so you wouldn't have to spend as much money. And I guarantee in 2 years I'd have it. And I said, here's what I'll do. I'll go to every single boy. I'd go to all the boys that were like all state for basketball, that weren't given some form of scholarship for basketball. And I'd say, if you're willing to identify when you're on the court as a women's basketball player, I'll bring you on the team, and then we would have one actual female from the state of Utah. And I said, I guarantee we would win the tournament. Now, I got a couple nasty phone calls, people upset with me, but it'd be easy. And I've had people like, well, John, you don't know what it's like. You don't know what you're talking about. Some of those women are really good. It makes national news every single time a female dunks. There's a 6'8" female basketball player. I think it's Brittany Grimes or something like that. She was the one that was over in Russia that we had to use that got caught with drug paraphernalia, and she was in prison, and we had to do a prisoner swap to get her out. Biden did. She's like 6'8", and she doesn't dunk the basketball only on like the rarest of occasions. Someone like Karl Malone probably had a dunk every other game. So Michael Jordan, I bet you dunked the basketball every other game, if not more often. So the bottom line is, what I do is just get a bunch of guys who couldn't get a scholarship, give them a 2-year scholarship or 4-year scholarship, whatever whatever the schools, say SUU or Dixie or whatever the case may be, would allow me. And then I'd also get like one female player. And Arkansas years and years ago won the men's national NCAA tournament. And they had, I want to say it was like every single one of their players was black, with the exception of they had one white guy. So I'm like, I'll do the same thing. And we'd even let the girl play once in a while. Bottom line is, the guys would smoke the best female basketball players. Absolutely. I years and years ago had a conversation with a basketball scout, someone that scouted both men's basketball and women's basketball. And I was talking to him. I'm like, so, I've got some people that have told me, that like the average high school player couldn't compete with like the top level basketball player, female basketball players. And he's like, the average 5A basketball team in the state of Utah would destroy the women's Olympic team. And his term was destroy. And he's like, John, it's not even close. He goes, those guys, he goes, in a 5A basketball team, yeah. Dwayne's pulling this up. the worst third-string college men's basketball team could beat the best WNBA team. Absolutely. Absolutely. Wouldn't even, in fact, I don't even think it'd be close if they really were really, really mean about it. So the bottom line is men should not be competing in women's sports. And I think it's one of the dumbest things that we've allowed. And it's just come out of allowing people to say stupid lies. It's lies. Men are not women. Women are not men. And the bottom line is we need to keep them out of, men need to be out of women's sports. Sorry, you were born a man. Done. You don't get in. And as I shared, a young man who did the worst on the whole out of JV, came in very last, won the varsity championship for women. So the bottom line is it's completely unfair, and it's completely wrong, and it's completely immoral. And going up 2 inches, normally you win by half an inch, something along those lines. To go up 2 inches and to beat them by 2 inches, that's ridiculous. And I wouldn't even be surprised, like with Lena Thomas, she didn't win every single race. He jaked it a few races and lost a few. And it was just so he didn't get slammed for winning every race. He would have smoked every single female. Okay, all right, so enough with that one. The next incident I want to talk about was the tragedy that happened down in Texas at a high school, at a varsity high school track meet, where a young man killed another young man. There was an altercation, and it was between a Carmelo Anthony and a Austin Metcalf, I believe, was the young man's name. So why do I bring this up? Black on white, it's not really that. What it is we have, it's in the culture too much, not just with it's in our culture way too much, the hip hop, rap, thug culture. And it's on both, it's in everybody. Hispanic, Asian, white, black, Polynesian. Unfortunately, the Polynesians, even my favorite people of all people, the Polynesians are the best race. Human race, part of the human race is the Polys. And I'll go to my grave saying that. I love the Polys. Even they are involved in the gang culture. What we need to do is change the way we look at things. Sorry, bottom line is we need mother, father, families. We should not subsidize women that have children out of wedlock. We need to say, you're on your own. If you have a child out of wedlock, you're on your own. And how hard do we have to go after to turn this around? We have abortion that comes from it. We have, and then these young men are not raised by mothers, or raised by mothers with no father. Sorry, fathers mellow out boys, tell them, teach them, and give them something to emulate, to model behavior that's not acceptable. It's not acceptable. Now, this young man who was the murderer actually comes from a two-parent family, but it's part of the culture. It's part of the sports culture, unfortunately. I love sports. What's not to love about sports? Well, I'm sure there's a number of people that aren't big fans of sports, but I think sports culture it teaches so many good lessons. How to grind, how to embrace the grind, how to embrace the suck, as it were. It's one thing I told my boys all the time. You got to embrace the suck. In order to be able to have the fun, you have to embrace the suck. So those are two things that I two news stories that I wanted to bring up that I don't have an article pulled up for. But Dwayne, you have CNN. Harry Einstein shares the latest poll on the President Trump, and it's he ain't no lame duck. He's a soaring eagle. All right, let's if you would, Dwayne. I don't know if you can pull that up and play that for us. Dwayne may be doing something important. Okay, so just a moment. Dwayne, let me know when that can play. That can play. All right, folks, I just messaged Dwayne. He may be in the middle of doing something else. Also, something that I want to mention, you are watching us here on KMMU, Main Street Media, Utah. You can reach us on any one of our pages on Rumble, YouTube, or X. You can watch the show live, and you can go back and watch past shows. Also, we're taking call-ins. So 385-899-2134. I did have a good friend and someone who would watch from and listen from time to time on K-Talk reach out to me and said, "Hey, are you doing your show today?" So, my friend, feel free to call in. Would love to hear your thoughts. All right. So when Dwayne gets back and has the ability to pull that up, we will go over it. So one of the things that has been a constant drumbeat of mine, what is the worst and most evil thing in happening in America? So if you could take a scalpel. So I'm going to have some listeners that are not going to like me on this, and I'm going to even admit that I'm not perfect when it comes to doing this, but probably the number one thing it started with was us not keeping the Sabbath day holy. If we kept the Sabbath day holy, we wouldn't have all the problems that we did. All the problems that we do. Now, John, what do you call the Sabbath day holy? Go read the good book. It's where it says, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. That's what I think we've got to do. And then from there, well, what are the Sabbath day things? Go pull up your scriptures. Go read what it says you're not supposed to do on the Sabbath day. Now, that does get a little hard because we still got to have police out there. We would have a lot fewer of them if we lived that way. We still need to have hospitals up and running because people still have heart attacks or whatnot on Sundays. People still get injured. Youth, teenagers have lungs collapse on Sundays. That happened to my son. And so, but we could go all the way back to that point. Fast forward, what's the things that we absolutely need to get rid of the most? What's the worst things that are happening right now? The number one thing that we need to get rid of, in my opinion, is satanic ritual abuse. And satanic ritual sexual abuse and satanic ritual abuse. We need to cut that out. Frankly, I think a lot, having talked to some that have been through this, it's happening a lot more than we realize. And just sexual abuse. Okay, so the child trafficking, we need to get rid of that. And I'm at the point where this is where I really struggle. So as a Christian, I believe everybody deserves one bad behavior. Hey, you should be tried, found by your peers. Maybe we don't let you out, maybe we do, but if it happens twice, if you've been convicted once and you do it again, it's death penalty. You're gone. We're taking you out, and it's a fast slam dunk. No, not many years of appeal. We make it public. We do it in public. It's a public, public hanging or public firing squad. I don't care which, but it needs to be known. Hey, you do this, you get caught, you're gone. John, why do you allow for like a 2-time person to get, or maybe someone get out? Maybe someone was convicted wrongly. That does happen still. Maybe, just maybe, someone can turn their lives around. I believe in repentance. So, all right. No problems, Dwayne. So I'm just kind of, my thought is we need to get rid of that and get rid of that. So Dwayne's back here in just a moment, but I want to pull up an article. This is what I love. This is the type of things I love reading, and we need to read more about it. Here in the state of Utah, we had a we have a judge in Tremonton, I believe, that lives in Tremonton, and we have a fire chief of Tremonton that were lovers. In a minute, Dwayne, I do. That were lovers, quote unquote, had an intimate relationship, and also shared paraphernalia. In fact, the fire chief went before the judge, and the judge just said, no big. The prosecutors were asking that he not be allowed to have bail, be sentenced and be taken to jail immediately. He said, nope, $50,000 bond and released to their own recognizance. Well, come to find out, not too far off, not too far along, not too much later, they both had a relationship with one another and were sharing information back and forth. And some of the things they were talking about doing are terrible. In fact, I hope to be having someone on to talk about that a little bit here. So, but in Florida, and another thing that's terrible about it, it took the federal authorities to catch him, not local police. Now, maybe, just maybe, I've heard it here in the state, here in Utah County. I had a sheriff's deputy tell me, John, this was back when David Levitt, who's got some allegations against him, but when David Levitt was the Utah County, the district attorney for Utah County, voted for a position for the county, that I had a Utah County sheriff who was not just like a bottom level sheriff tell me, John, I can't take this to the Utah County prosecutors. I have to take this to the feds. I'm wondering if that's what happened. But the bottom line is, state of Utah, we got to figure this out. We got to fight this battle more. We got to be more like Florida. So I'm going to read this headline. Florida authorities bust massive global child pornography ring. Over 1 million videos seized, including infants sexually assaulted. 8 degenerates, including 7 Florida residents and a Turkish kingpin, now face the wrath of the law for their roles in the stomach-churning operation. The bust, spearheaded by Florida's statewide prosecution and Florida Department of Law Enforcement, uncovered a sophisticated dark web operation with ties to Turkey, where the alleged ringleader laundered money through hacking financial accounts. The most damning revelation, many of the buyers found this filth through TikTok. Florida, and that's another thing. No fan of TikTok. Florida Attorney General James Youthmeyer, a father of 3, didn't mince words at Monday's press conference, calling the perpetrators truly evil and vowing to lock them away where they'll never see the sun again. Thank heavens. All right. But for our next story, let's go to some good news. We've been hearing the sky's falling, Trump's doing terrible. All right. So if you would please play, Dwayne, if you please play that.
You want your Gateway Pundit?
If you'll play that Gateway Pundit article, yes.
Here it comes.
All right. And I should have said clip from the Gateway Pundit. Sorry about that. Looks like we're waiting for it to get ready to play. So, let me give you the headline. CNN's Harry Enton shares latest poll on President Trump. He ain't no lame duck. He's a soaring eagle. And Dwayne, go ahead and play it.
That is not a video.
That is not a video. I thought it had
No,
a
it's
video
not.
in it.
Nope, just a screenshot.
Oh, the video is in X at the bottom.
Okay, let me find it for you. Hang on.
That's okay.
Let's see.
We're working on it here, folks.
I'm gonna go find your X video on that one. Okay.
You've got to go find it, or you don't have it.
I don't have it. All you gave me was the Gateway Pundit. Maybe.
Okay,
maybe.
so at the bottom of the Gateway Pundit, at least on mine.
Found it. Here it comes. Got it. Okay.
Well, folks, we're trying to figure out this producer / host, John being a terrible host thing out. So forgive me on this one, folks. This is my fault, not my producers.
It's coming. Here we go.
Okay.
Let me grab this. Okay. And
I think there was this concern among some folks that Donald Trump would come in for a second term and kind of be a lame duck. He ain't no lame duck. If anything, he's a soaring eagle. What am I talking about here? Let's talk about Trump executive orders in 2025. He's already signed 111 so far. That is the most at this point in a presidency in at least 100 years. In fact, it's the most in any single year, and we're only in April, since Harry S. Truman in the early 1950s. The bottom line is whether you like Trump or you don't like him, you can't say that he's come in and not try to deliver on what he at least believes was his promises on the campaign trail, and he's doing so in historic fashion.
How are people reacting to and feel about Trump's approach?
Yeah, okay, so Trump's approach here, what are we talking about? Trump's approach to presidential power. I think the American people recognize what he's doing here is completely different. We're talking, get this, 86% of the American public believes that Trump's approach to presidential power is completely different from past presidents, compared to only 14% who believe it is in line with precedent. And we're talking about at least 79% of Democrats, independents, and Republicans. So again, you can agree or you can disagree with Donald Trump, but what you can't disagree with is that he's doing things very differently. I have used the Frank Sinatra quote before. He is doing it, quote unquote, my way, and that is what Donald Trump has done throughout both of his presidential terms, and he's certainly doing that, Kate Baldwin, in term number 2.
So completely differently, clearly they agree, but is it, take it a step further, do the people think he has too much, he's taken too much power?
Yeah, this I think is the real question, right? You can believe that he's doing stuff completely differently.
Let's pause it
but
right
do you
there
think
for a
that
second.
He has a little too much.
Just pause it. All right. So CNN, all the people on CNN absolutely think he's done too much. I'm going to say he's pretty much done. Has he done a little bit more? He's only using the same powers that has been used, what's been used previously before him. So I don't see that there is a whole lot different. Now, would I prefer that he isn't be doing these through executive orders? You bet. I wish Congress would step up and do their job. All right, continue.
Much power or not. And this is interesting. So Trump's presidential power is too much, the right amount, too little. Well, 47% say too much, but then you get 36% who say the right amount. Then you get 17% who say too little. So you're essentially dealing with a majority of the American public, 53%, who do not say that Trump has too much power. They either says he has too little power or the right amount of power. So the idea, that argument that Donald Trump is, quote unquote, a king, That I don't think holds with the American people. It does hold maybe with 47%, but with the majority of folks, they believe Donald Trump's doing something completely differently, and they don't believe he has too much power, and the executive orders he signed certainly suggest he's no lame duck. He is, as I said at the beginning, a soaring eagle.
All right, so here's what I'm going to share. I would agree with the 47% that say he has, that say too much power. But I would also say that all presidents have too much power. Surprising that there's 17% that says way too little power. Dwayne, do you have any thoughts on this one? And please forgive me, folks. I'm overcoming, not exactly sure, but I've got sinus infection, so trying to clear out the throat. What are your thoughts,
Well,
Dwayne?
you know, presidents have power. He's the most powerful man in the world. Okay. Whether people think it's too much or too little or just right, he's doing what he's promised to do. And he's used some measures. I mean, he uses that pen, the executive orders, to do pretty much whatever he thinks needs to be done, but he has a mandate to do it. The things he's doing is what he said he was going to do. Too much power, too little power. John, he's the most powerful man in the world. Okay, so, whoops, we lost your camera.
I'm still here. I'm still here. Just I'm grabbing something from behind the camera, as it were, and I realized I look like kind of a, I don't look. What can I say? I got a face for radio. What can I say? But the bottom line is, I would. So I was trying to find a note that I had from a while back, and hopefully I can find it for Joel Skausen, because there's a question I remember that I want to ask him. And I don't know that I put it in the notes. So, but bottom line is, I think he has too much power, but I think every president has too much power.
You are correct.
I wish Congress,
like I said, the most powerful man in the world.
But bottom line is I think he's doing exactly what needs to be done with the way the system has been played.
Well, and he's doing what he promised he would do. Okay. I don't think I've ever seen a politician do that.
Yeah.
And I've been around for a long time. I've never seen a politician keep his promises.
Especially so many of them. Every once in a while they'll keep a few of them, but they won't keep this many. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Joel Skausen has some very strong opinions of Trump. Very strong opinions of Trump, and I'm looking forward to getting his thoughts from of Donald Trump.
That's a good question to ask of Joel. Do you think he has too much power, not enough power, just right? It's like the Three Bears.
Okay, I will ask Joel, but I don't need to ask.
Yeah,
Joel.
you know what
I
he'll
know
say.
what Joel.
Yeah.
I know what he's going to say. But it will be interesting in what context he goes about talking about the power that he does have. And I'm really looking forward to having Joel on because the bottom line is, as I've stated, he has too much power, but every president has had too much power. And I'm
going to slip back behind the scenes. You go on, John. Okay.
Okay. Sounds good. So I had, what was his name? Ammon Bundy on, who ran for, I interviewed on K-Talk Radio. I interviewed Ammon Bundy. And Ammon Bundy shared with me when he was on. He's like, he was running for governor in Idaho. And he said, bottom line is, governors have way too much power. The governor of Idaho has way too much power. And at the very beginning of my governorship, I'm going to use that to powers that I don't want to use. But he goes, I'm going to undo a bunch of things that have been done by former governors, and I'm going to ask the legislature to jump in and step up and do their job. So the bottom line is, that's kind of my perception. I wish Donald Trump, and on some level, I'm sure he would say, I'm using the presidential power in ways that every other president has used it, and just doing what I need to do to get things done. So I think that's probably the case. I think that's probably why President Trump is, what's the proper way to put it, is going about doing those executive orders, and that's why the left can't scream so much. What I love is how President Trump is been winning a bunch of court battles. So as we wait for Joel Skausen to join us, and if he doesn't join us here real quickly, I will give him a ring. But here is I'm going to go to, if I can get it to pull up. Unfortunately, there we go. Judge Bosenberg makes his next move after Supreme Court vacates his order barring Trump from deporting Venezuelan gang members under the Aliens Enemy Act. In an unsigned order, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday vacated Judge Bosenberg's orders barring Trump from doing that. Last month, Judge Bosenberg granted a temporary restraining order to stop the Trump administration from deporting thousands of Venezuelan nationals believed to be members of Tren de Aragua, or Agua. Forgive me, I don't even know how to say that. Under Alien Enemies Act. Far left, America-hating leftist groups such as, and this is from the Gateway Pundit as well, such as the ACLU and Democracy Forward, rushed to a D.C. court in a desperate bid to shield dangerous illegal aliens from deportation. The High Court said Bosenberg lacked jurisdiction. The Supreme Court, however, said the administration must give reasonable notice for gang members to challenge their deportation in court. Oh man, that's terrible. that sucks. That's wrong. I don't like that at all. 5 Supreme Court Justices Roberts, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Thomas, and Alito were in favor of vacating Bosenberg's order. 3 liberal justices, Kagan, Jackson, and Sotomayor, dissented. Conservative Justice Amy Coney Barrett dissented in part. On Tuesday morning, Bosenberg canceled the scheduled hearing on the Alien Enemies Act. However, he gave the deported Venezuelan gang members another chance to pursue a preliminary injunction. Bosenberg seized on the Supreme Court's position allowing deporting gang members to challenge their removal in court. In yesterday's ruling, vacating the court's TRO, the Supreme Court held that the plaintiffs cannot be deported under the Alien Enemies Act without an opportunity to challenge their removal in federal court. It also determined that the appropriate venue for such proceedings is the Southern District of Texas, where plaintiffs are currently held. So that, I think, is also, I don't agree with that. Hey, once you're found guilty and you're not supposed to be here, here's what I would say. How long do they have? Okay, so is it something that it's like, boom, going to be handled in a week and then gone, including the appeals process? Then I'd say okay. But heaven knows, we know they're going to be here for months, if not years, under the normal system that we experience. Okay, so Dwayne, can you do me a favor?
Fire away, John. What do you need?
I am going to call I'm going to call Joel Skausen and see if he can join us. I'm just kind of thinking, is there something that you could play real quick? Do you have anything in mind that you could play real quick, even if it's replaying, like just the generic intro? Why don't you play the promotional video for KMMU? Let's play that
I'll
promotional
do that.
video.
I'll put some music on, and away we'll go.
And then I will also let you know if I've got Joel, if he's going to be joining us, and if we get him to join us, let's replay that intro.
Okay.
Okay.
You mean the news brief?
For the news brief. Yes, okay. Let's play that. Okay.
Here comes your.
All right. Thank you. And I'm gonna mute myself and pause the camera. Okay, so actually, I was thinking the KMMU promo video. I think we ought to play that.
I can do that too.
So, just got off the phone with Joel Skausen, and he's going to be joining us in about 5 minutes. So, here is my thought.
You want me to rerun all the intro stuff, the promo vid?
I want to rerun the intro stuff with the news, the news stuff. I want to run that when he joins us. I want to run that when he joins us. So, will you watch for him to join us? And once that does, just notify. I probably will see it myself, but in case I don't, I want to let's just let me know and say he's here with us. Then let's run that, and then we'll bring him, because I want him to hear some of the different topics, and I'm looking forward to having Joel join us. And for some reason, I've been meaning to ask Joel about, can't remember what his thoughts on a just overall opinion on something. I'm like, I remember I'm going to have to go back to last month's interview with him, because I said it online. Hey, we ought to talk about this, but I'm not going to be able to do that now, but I'm going to make a note for myself. So forgive me, audience, that I can't remember what it was, and maybe it wound up popping up during the show. But bottom line is, Joe will be joining us in about 5 minutes. That gives us time to talk about another news story. In fact, what I'm going to do right now is just see if there's any breaking news that I have not seen.
All right, I'm going to disappear, and when I see him, I'll ping you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. To criminal aliens. Okay. So, judge orders White House to lift ban on AP's access to the Oval Office East Room. What? Okay, sorry. We're going to pull this one up. This is a headline. This is where the judges are way out of control. A federal judge on Tuesday granted the Associated Press a preliminary injunction against the Trump White House's ban on their access to the Oval Office and East Room. In February, Trump blocked the far-left AP from the Oval Office from defying his executive order, renaming the Gulf as a Gulf of America. I gotta say, that's one of the greatest moves he ever did. As far as I see it as a troll move. While traveling to the Super Bowl aboard Air Force One, President Trump not only changed the name of this vast body of water, but also declared February 9th, 2025 as the inaugural Gulf of America Day. However, the far-left AP has resisted Trump's executive order. Today, our AP White House reporter was denied access to the Oval Office because the Associated Press recognizes the international body of water on our southern coastline as the Gulf of Mexico. While acknowledging President Donald Trump's order to rename it the Gulf of America, the Pentagon correspondent Tara Cope. The Associated Press filed a lawsuit against the Trump White House on Tuesday. A federal judge sided with the AP. On Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden, a Trump appointee, granted the AP's injunction against the White House and lifted the block as the lawsuit makes its way through courts. The court simply holds that under the First Amendment, if the government opens its doors to some journalists, if the government opens its doors to some journalists, be it to the Oval Office, the East Room, or elsewhere, it cannot then shut doors to other journalists because of their viewpoints. The Constitution requires no less. That was from Judge McFadden's 41-page opinion. Judge Fadden clarified that the government can choose which journalists to participate in specific interviews. Today, the court grants that relief, but this injunction does not limit the various permissible reasons the government may have for excluding journalists from limited access events. It does not mandate that all eligible journalists, or indeed any journalists at all, be given access to the president or non-public government spaces. It does not prohibit government officials from freely choosing which journalists to sit down with for interviews or which one's questions they answer, and it certainly does not prevent senior officials from publicly expressing their own views, the judge wrote. So, I would say this about these judges. I firmly don't think that the judges should have the right. So this is where it gets a little dicey. Why can't Main Street Media Utah have a reporter in the White House? Why can't, like, some little podunk paper in Hillsboro, Nebraska, if there is such a place, or there is a Salem in every state, basically. So some reporter from the smallest paper in Salem, Massachusetts, not Salem, Massachusetts. Let me pick a better state. Salem, Kansas. The smallest newspaper. Why can't they have access? This is where I think it gets really dicey in saying who can and can't have access. Like CNN has a smaller, has less viewers than the Daily, than like the Daily Wire does, has less than Blaze Media, has less than InfoWars. So the bottom line is, why in the world should they be able to have, these special seats set aside for them? NBC, CBS, ABC, all of them. I think the president should be able to have anybody in whatever room he wants and say, sorry, you don't get to be there. Doesn't mean that you can't report on them. But the bottom line is why does AP get to have someone there when the maybe Gateway Pundit now does? I don't know. But the bottom line is, it's been the far left journalism rags that have been there year after year after year. And it's really annoying that the AP thinks they're Reuters or whatever it may be, whatever media group. I don't think they should have that ability, and I don't think the judge should have ability, at least, especially to put in some form of stay. It should have to go through the courts, all the way through the courts, and be adjudicated. The bottom line is, I don't think there's any principle that AP should have standing over any other news media organization. And if the White House can say, this is who we're going to let in, then that's who they're going to let in. If they're going to say, well, that's who we're going to let on Air Force One, that's who they're going to let on Air Force One. Or there's got to be, or you come up with a random system or something along those lines. But like I said, it's not fair. It doesn't make sense to have every single news organization, quote unquote, news organization, and if it's a news organization, well, what's to keep Tim Pool from sending someone? What's to keep from Joe Rogan having someone? Joe Rogan definitely has more reach than CNN, ABC, CBS, and MSNBC combined. And CNN, I think I said. I might have said CNN and AP. Joe Rogan reaches more than all those people many times with his interviews. So the bottom line is, it's just not. It's not proper for a judge to make that decision. I think it needs to be made by the White House. And so what? If the White House wants to have their supporting press there. I mean, that I've said many times before. It's the Democrat mainstream press. CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC, all of those guys are Democrats. Most of the newspapers, Democrats. The Washington, I believe it's the Washington Post, New York Times. They're leftist rags. Why should they receive precedence or preference, not precedence, preference above any other news organization? Maybe it should be determined somewhat on viewership or readership. But the bottom line is, I don't think this is the place for a judge to be getting in. And so I disagree with this judge. Bottom line. All right. Hopefully we'll be having Joel join us here soon. I called him about 10 minutes ago. And let me do a little on-air producing because I'm going to see. I want to say that I sent that to Joel. Okay, I'm looking. Please forgive me, folks. I'm just doing a little on-air producing. If I don't hear from him in a couple more minutes, I'm going to go off camera and give him a call. Oh, there he is. Speaking of the man. Okay, so Joel, real quickly, we're going to run a 2-minute intro on the different stories that we want to cover. So we will bring you on right after that intro. But I wanted to let people hear the stories that we'll be covering with you. So we'll be bringing you on in just like it's 2 minutes and 47 seconds long. So Dwayne, if you can please go ahead and play that intro, that'd be fantastic.
From the Great Basin to the Rockies to the four corners of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Dwayne Benson here for KMMU Main Street Media, Utah, coming to you live. We are streaming on YouTube, Rumble, X, and our website, kmmu.org. Please join our host, John Twitchell, for Let's Talk Utah's Talk with John. In the news, from the JFK files, apparently there are missing memorandums that could contain crucial information that was never submitted to the National Archives, according to an author. James H. Johnston, author of Murder, Inc., the CIA under John F. Kennedy, told The Hill that memorandums written following a private hour-long conversation between LBJ and several CIA operatives at the author's residence 6 days after the former president's death are not included in the data dump. We're curious, what else could be missing? According to CNN, China calls Trump's new tariff a mistake upon a mistake and is looking for opportunity in the new global trade war. While many nations are scrambling to strike tariff deals with Trump, China is standing up to him, hoping to turn crisis into opportunity. Trump advisors say that more than 50 countries have reached out for tariff talks. Within 48 hours of Trump's market-hammering announcement on tariffs on countries across the world, China, the world's second largest economy, swiftly retaliated with its own punitive measures on U.S. goods and firms. President Donald Trump is winning big with several decisions by the Supreme Court. In a 5-4 ruling on Friday, the justices granted the administration's request to terminate the grants while litigation over the issue proceeds. The High Court's action lifted an order a federal judge in Boston issued last month, blocking the administration from terminating the grants for teacher training programs. Monday night, the court ruled that the Trump administration could continue to deport Venezuelan migrants using the Wartime Powers Act for now, overturning a lower court stay by Judge James Boasberg that had put a temporary stop to the deportations. A victory for the Trump administration. According to CNN, the Trump administration is highlighting drug cartels as the major national security threat, but omits climate change. The U.S. intelligence community's annual threat assessment led with the threat from drug cartels for the first time in the report's nearly 20-year history, according to Senate Intelligence Chairman Tom Cotton and a CNN review of previous assessments. The assessment omitted any reference to the national security implications of climate change, a sharp reversal from previous intelligence assessments, including those under Trump's first administration. What do you think about the threat assessment, John?
Well, even more importantly, let's say this. What does Joel Skausen think about those reports? So, bottom line, let's bring on Joel Skausen. I consider him a good friend. Here's the thing that I have found being in radio and so forth. Dwayne, I'll let you bring up Joel because I think I brought him on at the same time you attempted to. I consider Joel a very good friend. Now, here's what I found in radio. In radio, I have a relationship with the audience, but I don't necessarily have a relationship with every listener. I've been listening to Joel Skausen since probably in the 1990s. So forgive me for calling you my good friend, Joel, but I consider you one of my wise advisors.
Well, thank you, John. It's good to be with you again once a month.
Okay, so let's do this real quickly, folks. For those of you, we've got new listeners all the time. So I want to introduce you to Joel Skausen. Joel Skausen is a political scientist by training. He's specialized in philosophy of law and constitutional theory, and is also the designer of high security residences and retreats. We're going to bring him on about that one of these days. Joel was raised in Oregon and later served as a fighter pilot for the U.S. Marine Corps during the Vietnam era, prior to beginning his design firm, specializing in high security residences and retreats. During the 80s, he took a leave of absence to serve as the chairman of the Conservative National Committee in Washington, D.C., and concurrently served as the executive editor of Conservative Digest. So, why did I want to bring that up? For the audience that is not familiar with Joel Skausen, bottom line is Joel Skausen has been in the minutia of things, and on top of that, happens to be the nephew of the other, well, not as well known Skausen in my world, but Cleon Skausen. So Joel has been in this since, you could say, since his very, very youth, and he has been following politics and culture and been commenting on it for almost as long. So Joel, thank you for joining us. Joel, are you there? Uh-oh. Looks like we're having a little bit of trouble getting Joel. All right. So hopefully he comes back. Boy. And okay, Dwayne, real quickly, is it me or is it Joel?
He's doesn't have enough bandwidth.
Frozen.
He's frozen. That is correct.
Yep. Okay, so it's Joel. Boy, I get too long-winded. Well, that's part of the problem, is I'm just too long-winded, I guess.
So I'm going to pop him out and see if he pops back in. Oh, he took himself out. He's gone. Let's try.
There he is. There he is. He's back again. Joel, sorry about that.
It's probably my fault. I've got an intermittent connection here.
Okay. Well, bottom line is, I'll take whatever connection I can get to Joel Skausen, and we'll take that. Now, before we go forward at all, when do you need to be done?
At the end of the hour.
At the end of the hour. Okay. So we'll have you done at 6 o'clock. So thank you for your time. So there were a couple subjects that I emailed you about, and the first thing that I'd like to have your opinion on is the JFK. Now, that we won't spend the most time there, but and also I want to tell people this. You can read Joel Skausen, and you can read his World Affairs Brief. You can go to worldaffairsbrief.com to find out more about him. At the end of this show, right before you drop off, Joel, I'd like you to talk a little bit about the World Affairs Brief and how people possibly can get a copy and find out more about you. But Joel, I want to get your thoughts on the JFK files. This is something that you've had recently in one of the articles in the World Affairs Brief. And so your headline for that was JFK Files, More Garbage and More Missing Files. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, they've released about 60,000 pages so far, and it's all mostly stuff that's been released before, and it's really a lot of boilerplate. Nothing about the real conspiracy about the government hiring mafia hitmen to and using Oswald as a patsy. He knew he was a patsy, and that's why the mafia had Ruby kill him on orders from the CIA. But you're never going to find any of that in the files. This stuff, and unfortunately, because Donald Trump doesn't know anything about conspiracy, he's never really studied this subject, he's not going to know whether or not they're releasing this stuff to him or not, except for the fact that he told Judge Napolitano of Fox News that Mike Pompeo came to him and told him something horrible, that he said, you can't possibly release this, it'll destroy the reputation of the United States. So if he doesn't find what Pompeo told him in the files, he's going to know something up. Now, will he have the courage to come out and tell? When Judge Napolitano asked him what Mike Pompeo told him, he said, I can't tell you, it's classified. Well, Donald Trump has the authority to declassify and tell anything. So Donald Trump holds the secret. Now, I don't know if Pompeo told him a false story or not, but apparently it was embarrassing enough to keep him from revealing or, the files during his first administration. Now, the Kelly Foundation has another whole series of documents that they have not released. And I'm very skeptical of the Johnson files that have been leaked, because this is a disinformation scheme that Johnson had Kennedy killed. The government, the deep state, had Kennedy killed. And of course, Johnson was a player within the deep state, and he made some incriminating phone calls, but there's no way that Johnson personally had the kind of contacts the deep state had with the mafia to hire these hitmen. So we're never going to find the truth, and we're never going to find the truth about the Martin Luther King files. When I was in Washington as chairman of the Conservative National Committee, J. Edgar Hoover died, and Mr. Patrick, his assistant, was the temporary head of the FBI, and I called him up and I asked, what is in the JFK files that they've locked them away for 50 years? And he said, well, I can't tell you specifically, but I can tell you that there are 13 file cabinets we sent over to the National Archives. 8 of those file cabinets are full of the pornographic evidence we had and surveillance of his daily trysts with prostitutes. 8 file cabinets.
Martin Luther King. Speaking of Martin Luther King,
the biggest hypocrite, religious hypocrite in the world. The other 5 file cabinets were of his relationship with the communists. So none of that's going to get revealed. How could they? It would destroy the reputation of Martin Luther King. And nothing's going to reveal on the RFK assassination. RFK already knows that it was the bodyguard behind him that shot him in the back with 238 bullets. And Sirhan was shooting from the front, was a 6-shot 22 revolver. There were 9 bullets taken out of the cabinetry of various different calibers. So this was a setup, and we're not going to get that information either. The deep state is still in charge. I mean, Trump is going after, and it's good, he's going after the entrenched bureaucracy. He's going after the secret slush funds and funding schemes for leftist things that they've been going on for years in the Treasury Department. That's why it's been held secret. The judges just released them to go back into those files, but that's all good, but that's not the deep state. The deep state are the hidden hit squads who do the dirty tricks, who assassinate presidents, who do many other evil things, and they aren't even on the government payroll. I had a government informant that I interviewed one time when I was in Washington, and he told me that they brag that they don't have any public funding, that they get funding, secret funding through the CIA, through drug enforcement money and other things that they pay the deep state operators with. Now, there's some crossover between the bureaucracy and the deep state. I mean, James Comey was deep state. Robert Mueller was deep state. Both of those were involved in the cover-up of the JFK or of the 9/11 deep state operation. And Brett Kavanaugh, who's on the Supreme Court, was a deep state. He was second in command to Ken Starr in the cover-up of the Vince Foster murder, which they called a suicide. And he was in charge of discrediting the witness that could prove, in fact, that it was not a suicide.
Okay, so my producer just asked me to ask you a question about the Trump assassinations, and we'll get to that. But first, there's 2 things that I want you to kind of dive down on. So actually 3 things. What was Johnson's culpability? What involvement did he have? So your statement was he was not involved in the initial, he wasn't involved in the assassination, but he definitely benefited from and wound up becoming the president. Also, he was known to say, I'm going to be, I'm sick and tired of those Kennedy boys. I want to get rid of Kennedy. There is a Kennedy, there recently is a 2 of Johnson's underlings. It was played on Alex Jones. My guess is you probably heard that. But 2 of his...
No, I don't listen to Alex Jones.
Well, you might have had someone, I realize that, but you may have had someone that said, hey, there were 2 underlings of Johnson's that there's a new recording that's come out in like the last 6 months, and it was played on Alex Jones. It's been played other places. I don't know if you've heard about.
No, I did hear about that one. Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you've had a chance to listen to it. So if you've had a chance to listen to it, I'd like your thoughts. But then you said, so one thing is you said, I think you said that the information on what happened with JFK is not in the files. Why would it? I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask this question. I know there's a lot of people that will say, well, why wouldn't it be in the files? How would they not, if like the Ben Shapiro's of the world, hey, bottom line, if it's not in the files, there's no way that it could not have been anybody but what we were told, and it was Oswald.
Well, the deep state controls the National Archives.
They could.
I mean,
I would
wouldn't have been
they
wouldn't have been the custodians of these files had they been honest and open and committed to transparency in government. They're not. They're deep state, and so they're going to control what gets released. I'm sure
let the FBI? Would they even let the FBI agents ask the proper questions?
Well, look, there were 2 FBI agents at the Bethesda Hospital during the autopsy of JFK. When that body arrived, it arrived in a military casket in a body bag. And when the doctors at Bethesda opened it up, and the 2 FBI agents kept copious notes of what was on it, and that all came out in David Lipton's book, Best Evidence on the Body. The doctors exclaimed the head fell off, the brain was missing. It had already been operated in the front to remove any bullet fragments from. They basically removed all the bullet fragments in the brain, and so that they couldn't prove that there were shots from the front. And J. Edgar Hoover kept that file hidden until, through Freedom of Information, after Hoover's death, Lipton got a hold of the files from the 2 agents. And it's very incriminating that that body was taken off the airplane. In fact, when the Bethesda radiologist, after they took x-rays of the body, was walking across the mezzanine in the lobby to go get those x-rays developed, in comes Jackie Kennedy with the fancy casket that is supposed to have the body of JFK in it. So obviously the body wasn't in there. The body was already being autopsied when she arrived there. So that body was switched into another casket in the flight from Dallas to Washington, D.C. And then it was taken off in the back of the other door to a helicopter that took it to Walter Reed Medical Center, where they did that first autopsy. And this is incredible stuff. You can see how complex. Could Oswald have done that? No, this was government operations. Could Johnson have done that? No, he was on the airplane. So you see, this is proof that Johnson was not in charge of this. These recordings by underlings of Johnson are disinformation to try to divert the public. Johnson's dead, so why don't we blame Johnson? That's what the deep state is trying to do. Johnson's not a popular guy, but this is all disinformation.
Okay. So who was the main players? Was it?
Well, we don't know who gave the orders, but we do know one of the deep state people was in Kennedy's inner circle, was McGeorge Bundy. Kennedy gave the orders to allow the airstrikes to go in support of the Bay of Pigs. When he went to sleep, McGeorge Bundy canceled it in the night. And that's when Kennedy woke up. He swore he was going to stop covert operations in the CIA and kill it. And that signed his death warrant, or one of the things that signed it. But we don't know. These are top secrets. They don't keep records about who gave those orders. Now, what there probably are that are not going to be in the archives are communications instructing somebody to contact the mafia about some sharpshooters that they can provide, etc. And that, those things have all been edited out. We're never going to see any of that. Guaranteed.
Okay. So one of the reasons why I think it's important to bring up the JFK situation is the bottom line is if all that happened with JFK, why in the world wouldn't it be still happening today? It's just it's been passed down on to the next guy, to the next guy, to the next guy, and we have the same type of stuff that is happening now. My producer just said, I'm curious what Joel thinks about the attempted assassination. Was it the deep state that was involved in the 2 assassination attempts against Trump, both in Pennsylvania as well as in Florida?
Yes, both of those were deep state operations, but using patsies, not professional sharpshooters. And So I've written extensively in the World Affairs Brief about both of those assassinations. Just the short version is that we know that the Pennsylvania shooter was a deep state patsy because he had a couple of disposable cell phones and that were tracked to his home. And also those same cell phones showed up at FBI headquarters in Washington, not headquarters, but one of their field offices in Washington, D.C. twice. That means he had contact with the FBI before that. And, the FBI messed up the scene. They washed down the evidence. They removed the body and other things. They did many things to cover up for this. But there has never been an appropriate assassination inquiry into that Pennsylvania shooting. Especially, no one has ever talked about the cell phone tracking data that the Heritage Foundation paid for and got a hold of, a private organization. Now, the Florida operation, now here's a guy in Hawaii who makes less than $3,000 a month, and he's flying first class to Florida, picks up a stolen car and picks up a stolen weapon, and he doesn't have any accomplices? Come on. I mean, who has those kind of contacts where you drop off, you come in and you get a stolen car and you get a stolen weapon, and you sit and decide to take a pot shot at Donald Trump? But these were patsies. These were not professional shooters. And he, obviously the Secret Service was on enhanced duty, and they did a good job of going ahead in Trump and seeing this rifle and taking him down. But there's never been an appropriate investigation into the Florida shooter. They've never discussed ever how he afforded and how he got a hold of the stolen car and how he got a hold of the stolen rifle. Nothing. No police, no FBI, nothing.
Flying first class from
Florida
I remember
Hawaii to Florida.
Yeah, that's not cheap. That's not cheap at all.
That's not cheap. Yeah.
That's probably close to $10,000. Just to guess. Wild shot in the dark. Definitely over 4,000. So, okay, there were a couple other topics that I said I wanted to hit on. So I'm just going to give you the topics, and I'm going to let you pick which ones you think are most important. Trump tariffs, a huge mistake. More on the coming war with Iran. Legal fight against judicial overreach. Europe using lawfare against conservative candidates, and Trump administration's annual threat assessment downplays real enemies. Which one of those do you want to cover? And
well, I want to cover the tariffs and the national threat assessment, which are two of the biggest mistakes that Donald Trump was making in his presidency. Now, we are all in favor of his dismantling the woke agenda, though as a constitutionalist, I'm concerned about his use of executive power. This expanded use of executive power, especially in tariffs, is so problematic for the nation because as soon as Donald Trump is gone, the Democrats can use those same powers to reinstate all of that stuff. And so there really isn't any safety constitutionally in having the president having these executive powers, though we can applaud what the Democrats have done for 20 years, he undid in 2 months. Except that the courts are using lawfare against Donald Trump. And to a certain extent, if it weren't for the Supreme Court, they would have blocked every single move that he's made. But the Supreme Court is coming to the rescue, fortunately, and I'm hopefully optimistic about that. Now, in terms of tariffs, Donald Trump's two major mistakes in the presidency, and these are chronic mistakes. This tariff policy is a huge mistake. It's going to create a depression. Already the stock markets are going down. That means pensions are collapsing. Pension funds are all invested in the stock market. And so people are going to be denied their pensions. You're going to have pension bailout from the government. And Donald Trump is not good on restraining spending. He knows that he can't survive politically by cutting welfare to the public. And so he protects Social Security, which is only about half welfare. Half of it's what you pay into it. Another half is the government funding and using up the Social Security funds. But he's going to spend no matter what it takes. I mean, when you have a harebrained idea like we're going to rebuild Gaza as a casino resort on the Mediterranean, who's going to pay for that? Do you see? It's just stupid. But the other major mistake is foreign policy for Donald Trump. He is as naive as a Pollyanna. he doesn't believe there are any enemies out there. He thinks Kim Jong-un of North Korea, the dictator, is still a bosom pal of his because he used flattery against Trump. He thinks Xi Jinping, well, he thought Xi Jinping was fine. Now he's fighting against Xi Jinping because Xi Jinping is standing up to his tariffs. Now, Xi Jinping is a rabid communist country, an existential enemy, and so is Russia. I've documented on your show and many other shows where I've interviewed about the phony fall of the Soviet Union, how they put the Russian territories into Ukraine so they'd have an excuse after the phony fall to come in and attack Ukraine. They faked the 2014 coup. It wasn't a Western coup, even though they financed the protesters. The communist president is the one who allowed them to win by standing down the Secret Service and the Berkut, the riot police that were keeping them hemmed in, so that he could get a phony nationalist elected, Petro Poroshenko, who could antagonize the Russians. You see, as a communist, Yanukovych couldn't have antagonized the Russians. They said, what's going on? He's a Putin friend. He's a communist. Why is he antagonizing? So he fakes his own demise, gets a false nationalist elected, and then justifies the invasion of 2014. All of this was admitted to Tucker Carlson in his interview in Moscow, and Tucker Carlson didn't pick up on it because he doesn't know his conspiratorial history. So in his national threat assessment, he says that China, Iran, and Russia, none of them want to pick a fight with the United States. Therefore, we can basically stand down and talk about our drug threat from the cartels. Well, you're not going to solve that problem. As I've covered in the World Affairs Brief, one of the major drug enforcers indicated that the cartels are paying off everybody in high levels of the Mexican government with at least $100,000 a year to protect the cartels.
I want to know how much they're paying off people here in the United States, because I think that's happening too.
Well, yes, but it's very big to pay off the cartels in Mexico, because then you keep any real enforcement. I mean, they do token things, just like the United States does token attacks against the mafia at the lower level. But because they have an incestuous relationship with the mafia, they protect the high level people. They never get taken down.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why Robert F. Kennedy, the attorney general after Jack Kennedy, was killed, because he was going after the mafia, and the deep state couldn't allow that. They had gotten the mafia to kill JFK, and they weren't going to allow him to be taken down or investigated by Robert F. Kennedy. But going back to the tariffs, as I pointed out in the World Affairs Brief, and your listeners can get a free copy of that brief by going to worldaffairsbrief.com and clicking on Request of Sample on the left-hand side. It gives you the current brief on the tariffs being a mistake and options on how to subscribe. It's about $1 a week to get my opinion. I
just spent $88 here less than a month ago, and it's some of the best money that I spend all year.
So you got a 2-year subscription? Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Well, thank you very much, John. My viewpoints on the brief are unique. I am the top national expert on conspiracy in the United States, and so it is a conspiratorial view of what's going on that the deep state is doing to us that you won't find anywhere else. And I am commenting about Trump, who's not deep state. Donald Trump is simply naive. He has never been political growing up. He was best friends with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and others. Didn't know conspiracy. That's why he got snookered when he came into the White House. Didn't know any conservatives to name to the 4,000 positions in the White House, and had to rely on Reince Priebus of the Republican National. And they often put a deep stater into the Republican side to control it at the top, even though it's filled with conservatives at the grassroots level. They control the Republican Party at the top level nationally and in most states, including red states too. You have a mainstream type of person. They try to get in to control the Republican. I mean, in Utah, for example, we've had contests between rhino Republicans running the Republican establishment and real conservatives. And boy, they come out in droves and try to denigrate any real conservative to run the Republican Party.
Phil Lyman, Spencer Cox.
Well, Phil Lyman actually is a pretty good person. I've talked to Phil and met him, and he's done a very good job running against Rhino Republican Cox for governor of Utah. And of course, the government, or the the deep state in Utah, through the Republicans, took away the right to the caucus to determine who the nominee. We never would have had Mitt Romney as a senator. We never would have had. They got rid of Bennett through the caucus system. We never would have had Cox. Would have lost. In fact, he lost so significantly in the caucus that he was disqualified from running through the petition. And Lyman documented that was an illegal petition drive because he didn't get enough votes in the caucus to apply for that. Right. But that was the state legislature that took away the right of the caucus and introduced the petition system. And they're trying to introduce, of course, the ranked voting in Utah like they have in Alaska. And that's a death knell for the conservatives. It basically means you pick first choice and the second choice. And of course, the conservative never gets the first choice. And so the second choice always go to the less than conservative. And those votes add up and guarantee that you always get a rhino Republican in instead of a real conservative in ranked voting. So it's a trap. But I want to finish up on tariffs before
please.
The important thing to realize, as I pointed out in the World Affairs Brief, is that tariffs are extremely destabilizing to the economy, especially when one man has the power to raise them and lower them, raise them and cut them, and say yes and say no. I mean, can you imagine all the hundreds of thousands of marketing people, accountants, and others that have to, and ordering people who have to find alternative supplies, rearrange prices, do accounting, check for balances and whether or not you're profitable, etc. And then he drops the tariff the next day or delays it for 30 days, and then you revise it back. Who's paying for all those hundreds of thousands of hours worldwide to handle the business damage that that's doing to the tariffs? And there's a myth about it saving jobs. It does save a few jobs in the things that are the companies that are protected. But it always displaces at least 5 to 10 times more jobs in the economy because of the loss of cheaper products, cheaper raw materials that make them have to raise their prices. Their sales drop then, and they have to lay people off. For example, when they raised the steel tariffs to save the steel companies, it saved 1,000 jobs during the first Trump administration, and $75,000 jobs estimated were lost because of layoffs from higher steel prices. And so, even there's a myth about bringing companies home. It's not a myth in the sense that companies can be tempted, although it's not just price. We have OSHA, we have healthcare costs, which are some of the two biggest costs of every company in terms of, and then big unions here in the United States. And those things are what drove the companies to go to China, who don't have any of those regulations. If they come back, they're going to use the higher prices that they have to pay for all those healthcare costs and those workman's comp and Social Security and all those things they've got to pay. So the consumer, they're coming back because they've got a 25% profit margin now because of the tariffs to fill, and they're going to fill it up. The consumer isn't going to get anything cheaper because of companies moving back, because they're going to grow into the profitability that the tariff provides to them. So that's a myth as well. But the instability of the economy, and look what it's done to the stock market. What's interesting is that the day before yesterday, when someone mistakenly tweeted that Trump was going to give a 90-day suspension of the tariffs, the S&P reversed itself and went up 10%. And then it was debunked and it lost everything in the next 20 minutes. I mean, you talk about scaring the markets. I'll tell you, pension funds are in there. And of course, treasuries tend to go up when the markets are down. And when they go up, of course, the interest rates, will not come down. Treasuries have not gone up substantially, but they probably will to a certain degree. But the markets will be devastating to the small investor and pensions. The big boys short the markets, they get out, they know what's coming, and so they don't lose. But this is going to be devastating. Remember the 1930s when they had the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Good old Smoot, of Utah, was stupid enough to put tariffs on with Hawley. It kept us in a depression a total of 10 additional years because of those tariffs in the 1930s. And the displacement in the market is going to be horrendous under this. And Donald Trump is just bullheaded. He continues to say, we have to take our medicine. This is going to resolve itself. We're going to make it. It's going to be a new prosperity. He's dead wrong. It's going to be bad. And Trump's going to get the blame. And the deep state's welcoming this. I mean, Trump is shooting himself in the foot.
Yes.
He's not going to, we're going to lose his majorities in Congress in 2026, and then in 2028, he's going to lose the election again. And he's trying to run for a third term, and that's not legal according to the 22nd Amendment.
I think that's a troll. I know that he said he really means it, but I still think that's a troll. I really don't think that he means it, but you never know with Trump. You never know.
Yeah, you never know. But Trump's ego is big enough. He thinks, this is a guy, John, who's on a roll. And Donald Trump doesn't think when he's on a roll. He's a blustering bull in a china closet. And he's just, the only outfit out there that is the yes man and justifying everything that Donald is Breitbart News. Normally Breitbart's pretty good, but they're really bad on this Trump. They are just bringing in every justification to justify, and they're all wrong. This is going to be bad for the economy. It's a $600 billion tax increase on the American people. In fact, that's what the Supreme Court ought to rule, is that these tariff increases are tax increases and therefore have to go through Congress.
Okay. All right. So quick question. Is there any reason to be taxing China? Because one thing, unfortunately, what has happened with, Kissinger going over there and opening up, and Nixon, and then all the other presidents, we've now funded China to be able to build a navy that's bigger than ours.
And that's what I pointed out for years in the World Affairs brief, that Henry Kissinger in the Paris peace talks not only allowed China to have a seat at the United Nations and give it a veto power in the Security Council. Why do that to your enemy who had armed Vietnam? China was the main enemy. We couldn't even, as a pilot in Vietnam, you couldn't even mine Haiphong Harbor. You couldn't hit their missiles. You couldn't hit their docks to protect China. I mean, that's what globalists do. They're building enemies, and that's what they've done. And we never should. And that's what Newt Gingrich did in his contract with America. It wasn't on the contract, but the first thing he did when he got elected as Speaker of the House is pass World Trade Organization entrance for China, because he's a globalist. He's a rhino Republican globalist. So we made China, but now American consumers are 80% hooked on Chinese goods. 80% of our consumer goods are made in China, and so if you cut it off, and I think one of the appropriate uses of tariffs is more than tariffs, is it ought to prohibit trade with an existential enemy. No trade at all, because you're building an enemy if you trade with them, as we have built China. And so you say, are tariffs justified? Well, remember, Trump is going to, he said, if China doesn't take down their matching tariff against mine, I'm going to throw on an additional 50% tariffs. You know who's going to pay for that? Everybody who shops at Walmart. Every American is going to pay that, or it'll cost stagflation, meaning you can't afford to buy those things at Walmart anymore, so you stop buying them. And so the economy starts to go down, and that will add to the stock market collapse. This is not good.
Let's hit, we're running out of time. You said you wanted to also talk about the Trump's administration's annual threat assessment.
Well, I've already talked about the fact that he's naively thinking that we're going to have peace at any cost in Ukraine, that Russia isn't an extraterritorial. I mean, he's just saying they can't afford to strike us. China can't afford, because they would use, I mean, there are a lot of economists that have that view, that China can't afford to kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs for them. You know, but they can, because they don't realize that China wants to nuke our military and then blackmail us into submission, and then they control our entire economy. So you see, nuclear war is not aimed in the Chinese mind at cities. It's aimed at the military, and then you blackmail the West into submission, and you take the land because they need the they can't feed their people. They want Canada and the US for the agricultural growing capability. A lot of our crops are going to China, and the increase in tariffs on crops are going to kill the farmers market, going to China. And I'm all for that. I don't think we ought to trade with China. A lot of people don't realize a lot of our oil from Alaska gets shipped to Japan and to China. It's not used for domestic consumption.
Well, Biden dumped a bunch of oil out of the strategic reserves and sent it over to China. So, China has we do very well to China, and we've been way too friendly with them. So the great thing about the United States is we have this system where we have elections. We're much freer, yes, but we only think in at most 18-month to 2-year cycles, maybe 4-year cycles. China thinks in 50-year cycles.
Well, and they control every aspect of their government, so they can think in 50-year cycles.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it's now 5:59. I want to say thank you for joining us. Any last thoughts you want to leave us with before you mention how people can get a hold of the World Affairs Brief again?
Just remember that Trump is not going to save us. He's not your savior.
Amen.
I believe Trump has good intentions, but he's a bull in a china closet. He doesn't have a good handle on conscience. He doesn't get nervous feelings about these things, and he's surrounded by yes men. So he's not going to get good advice about tariffs. And so just remember, you're still going to have to prepare for war. Now, it's very interesting that those of us in the preparedness community, and I'm one of the pioneers, book sales are down about 60%. Preparedness supplies are down about 50 to 80%, depending on the supplier. People think that Trump has won and we're saved, and so we don't have to prepare. And that's a big mistake. War is still coming closer. In fact, it may accelerate because, as Russia has clearly said, Trump is going to give us everything we want. Let's push him to see how much we can get out of Ukraine. So his latest negotiating position is, I want not only everything I've conquered, I want the rest of the Donbass that I haven't conquered yet. I want you to force Ukraine to give it to us. Now, that angered Trump, and he threatened them with an additional oil tariff, but they bypassed that anyway by selling their oil to India, which then markets it to the United States. But this is a mess, and Trump really needs to start to wake up and see these types of things, and he's not getting good advice. So I do publish the World Affairs Brief each week. It's at worldaffairsbrief.com. My books on preparedness are at joelskausen.com. On the secure home, the high security shelter book of how to do a high security shelter in an existing basement, and strategic relocation, how to relocate for security, even within Utah, because there are nuclear targets in northern Utah, and the major population centers are going to be in bad trouble when the electricity goes out at the beginning of this war.
Okay, Joel, can you hold on for just a minute after the show ends? So I just want to say thank you to the audience. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining Joel and I. Joel Skausen, once again, of the World Affairs Brief. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you having you on once a month. I'm going to end our stream right now. Folks, have a great week. We'll see you next Tuesday.